God, that you would help us as we embark in your word. Help us to hear what the Spirit of God is saying to the church. And we'll give you glory. We'll give you praise. We'll give you honor for it in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. I'm going to share something that hasn't been, to my knowledge, I've never heard it in church before. I've heard verses, but not necessarily this whole context. So this is where we're going to go. Uh, Brother, if you can, I don't know if you, there's some things, if you can pull up, you remember I showed you how to pull up Proclaim and the date. Yeah, you go to, and pull up the date for tonight. Okay. All right. Here we go. Okay. All right. So we're going to embark upon uh, something that will open your eyes to something. It's not one of those spiritual, you're going to jump over the seats kind of thing, but it is something that will help you to understand God and some of the things that He's done, and it also promotes the veracity of the scriptures. What I mean by veracity is the truthfulness. Basically, God confirms His own word with what He does. I I look at what we did with the seven festivals. That shows that God is on time with everything, and He's done everything right according to what He's planned. And so tonight we're going to go to Daniel chapter 11. All right, and I'm going to kind of help you to hear what Daniel 11 is all about. Some of you probably who read the Bible, you probably read it, and you read all of these different things, and you wonder, well, what's it talking about? And because it kind of jumps around, it tends in the beginning to be vague. That's what it tends to be. All right, but it's not as vague as it appears. All right, it's it's very detailed. It's a detailed prophecy. Daniel 11 is a detailed prophecy that is corroborated by secular history. So if you study secular history, you would see that Daniel 11 is um, basically secular history confirms Daniel 11. It's just that Daniel 11 was given many years before this history. As a matter of fact, Daniel 11 spans 375 years. So you can know that. So when you read from Daniel 11 and you start reading, you are actually reading over the course of 375 years. That's why it doesn't always immediately make sense. But then you can go back and you can compare the characters along with the text, and you'll see that it's right on time. All right. So I want you to understand that. And this time period that it expands over. And brother, there's a chart. I've got a time chart there with some numbers on it. It's probably the very last box up there, the very last one. If you look at that particular box, we'll get up there. It is. I want you to pay attention. That's the time period. Daniel, and I just kind of gave an example so that you can see basically Daniel received this prophecy roughly around 539, the year 539, before the Christian era. Okay, that's BCE, 539 BCE, before the Christian era. And I just kind of showed you that from that, you start counting down, then you get to zero, and that's about the time of the Christian era in zero. Okay, that's about when you can say Jesus was born. I think he might have been born in two or three, the year two or three, and then I put 2025 because that's where we are. All right, so I just want you to understand. I did that just so you can see that particular thing. As a matter of fact, this prophecy, if you look at it, is probably about 2,300 years old altogether. If you do the math, it's probably about 2,300 years old. But I just give you that just so that you can understand that particular aspect of it. Now, as we get into the scripture, okay, we'll go Daniel chapter 11, and we'll start at verse number 2. Daniel 11, verse number 2. And remember who Daniel is talking to. Daniel's talking to someone that had skin like bronze, eyes like fire. Remember that? And basically, he's talking to Jesus, and the revelation is always of Jesus Christ. It comes from him, by him, for him. So, and you can read about that in Daniel chapter 10. Uh, Many people don't understand Bible prophecy because they don't understand the book of Daniel. You see, so if you want to understand biblical prophecy, you have to understand the book of Daniel. And there's an interesting little tidbit here that the initial revelation of the prophecy of mankind, okay, the initial revelation of the prophecy of mankind from where they were to the end of times did not come to a prophet. Apostles didn't exist, didn't come to a godly man. The actual first part of it actually came to an ungodly man. He's the one who received not the revelation, but he received the actual story of what would happen to man first. An ungodly man. Anybody know who that ungodly man was? Nebuchadnezzar. It was Nebuchadnezzar. He laid down, and then on his mind he was thinking, I wonder, but he had a great kingdom, a great kingdom. And so he's laying on his bed one night just before he went to sleep, and he's thinking, I wonder what's going to happen after me. Then he went to sleep. God says, okay, I'm going to show you. It goes to show that God knows what's going on in our minds and hearts, right? Doesn't matter who we are. Doesn't matter whether we're saved or not, whether we're believers or not. He knows what's going on in our hearts. And he knew what was going on in Nebuchadnezzar's mind. And so he showed him in a dream. Now, the only trouble is when Nebuchadnezzar woke up, the dream disturbed him greatly. But when he woke up, he couldn't remember the dream. That was the problem. See, so that's where Daniel comes in. And Daniel actually tells him what dream he had. Now that's a miraculous thing within itself, to tell you what forgotten dream you had and then what it means. See, so we come to this. Daniel had many such revelations, and this particular revelation is actually an explanation of a couple of revelations he had before then, a couple of visions he had seen before then. And so this is kind of a more of a detailed explanation. You see, particularly this first and second verse. He says, now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings are going to arise in Persia. Then a fourth will gain far more riches than all of them. And as soon as he becomes strong through his riches, he will arouse the whole empire against the realm of Greece. So this is a further uh, illustration of some of the things that God had already showed Daniel, but now God goes into detail about that particular time period. And in Persia, yeah, the Babylonian part of the empire is gone. The Persian part of the empire has risen. In history, you go to school in history, you will have learned about the Persian Empire. You might not remember much about it, but I'm sure that you heard about it when you were in school. You see, and he talked about the 3 kings that would arise in Persia. Those three kings, I don't have their names up here. Just didn't have the time, but just share with you, they were Cambyses, the son of Cyrus, and then a man by the name, he called himself Smerdis. He was not really Smerdis because the real Smerdis had been killed. He was the real Smerdis was Cambyses' brother, and he was killed. And in this other guy, he called himself Smerdis, and he takes the throne. You see, so he lied just so he can ascend to the throne, because the throne legally belonged to Smerdis, but he lied and assumed his identity, stole his identity so he could take the throne in Persia. And then finally, Darius uh, Hystaspes. You see, he was also called Darius the First. And he wound up taking the throne after that. So one, two, three in succession, they took the throne. Uh, Cambyses took the throne in 530. Okay, as we count downwards toward zero, and then the false Smyrna came behind. He didn't last long, and then Darius Hystaspes took the throne in 522, and he was there between 522 and 486 BC. Then he goes on in this verse. He says, "Then a fourth gained far more riches than all of them. He will arouse the whole empire against the realm of Greece." Now, you don't know who this person is, but then you do know. It says the fourth, but you don't really realize who he is. This particular individual was Xerxes. Xerxes, you may have heard about him. Another name that he actually goes by was Ahasuerus. Okay. Now, I know you remember Ahasuerus because he was the king who kicked his first wife out because she wasn't cooperative with her beauty, and he married Esther. You remember them? Okay, well, that's this fourth king right here. And what he did, he was strong enough. And then what he did was he decided to attack Greece. And he wound up getting the whole empire to go against Greece. At the time, Philip was the king of Greece. Yeah, this is Daniel 11. So we're dealing with the story of Daniel 11 because many times people, I know you've read you've read this story before, but you're like, what am I reading? Everybody read this particular passage? You know what I'm talking about? You read this, but you're wondering, what am I reading? So I'm sharing with you what you're reading. It's a tremendous prophecy that was given by God. In verse, so I want you to understand. So in verse 3, we come to verse 3. Remember Xerxes, um, he basically got the whole empire to decide to come against Greece. But then in Greece, a mighty king will arise, and that's who rose in Greece. A mighty king will arise, and he will rule with great authority and do as he pleases. Anybody know who that king is? You should. Huh? This king in verse 3. A mighty king will arise. And I'm telling you, he's in Greece. And he will rule with great authority. That should be a clue. Greece. Alexander the Great. I know you've heard of him. As a matter of fact, they made a movie about him just recently. But he's that mighty king. And it took him 13 years to complete his conquest of that area, including Persia. You see? And as soon as he finished and everything was up, and they had this great party, and he sat down and he drank all this wine. He drank something like maybe the equivalent of a whole punch bowl of wine, an entire punch bowl, and he got sick immediately afterward. He wound up having a fever, and then he passed away. They thought he was dead. He wasn't actually dead. He was in a comatose state, and he lasted for about 6 days in that state. Because when they thought he was dead, he didn't change like a person. Normally a person dies after a few hours. Their skin becomes darkened, they become stiff, they can't move. Well, that didn't happen to him. So because that didn't happen to him, and because they didn't have any medical knowledge, they thought that he was a god because he lasted so long after they thought he was dead. But he actually wasn't dead. He was suffering from this uh, disease. I'm trying to think of the name of it, Guillain something. And as a result, it is kind of a muscle paralysis. And he had shallow breathing. He was still breathing in a shallow manner. But somehow, they didn't have the full understanding. They actually thought he was dead at that time. Yeah, Guillain-Barré. I think that's the name of it. Guillain-Barré. It's a disease. It's a muscle disease that it's like a paralysis. The person cannot move at all. And he has shallow breathing. They thought he was dead. At any rate, he died, though he eventually did die 1 month later after that. In verse number 4, it says, as soon as he is arisen, his kingdom will be broken up and parceled out towards the 4 points of the compass, though not to his own descendants, nor according to his authority which he wielded. See, for his sovereignty will be uprooted and given to others besides. So his power was broken up, and it was actually broken up. Daniel was told in one earlier vision that his power would be broken up to the 4 winds. See, um, and his power was broken up north, south, east, and west. Basically, that's what it was: north, south, east, and west. Um, and just so you can know, we'll start with the south. The south was uh, Ptolemy. That's who took over at that time, the Ptolemy. Uh, in the north, Lysimachus, and both of them basically about 305 BC, somewhere along that line. You may not know how to spell it. If you, I don't know if you want to spell that, but it's Ptolemy, then Lysimachus, and then in the east, Seleucus, and then in the west, Cassander. You see, and they all basically took the throne about 305 BC, except Seleucus. In the east, he took the throne in 312. Now, when we say north, south, east, and west, what we're actually talking about with reference to Jerusalem, wherever Jerusalem was. So these places were north, south, east, and west of Jerusalem. So understand that. Now, what was to the north in relation to Jerusalem? It was north of Jerusalem. It was Asia. Okay, basically the region of Asia. What was to the south was Egypt. What was to the east was Syria, and what was to the west was Macedonia. However, now we said Seleucus took Syria. He took that particular region, and that was in the east. But he established, basically, he gained power, and he wound up taking Babylon, which is to the north. He wound up taking Babylon. It's very important that we understand that part of it. And um, in doing that, then he also took Cassander. So he really, Seleucus in the east, rose in power. So then when that happened, Seleucus in the east, he rose with that kind of power. Now this region became a bigger region, and it was all north of Jerusalem. So then this, I'm sharing that with you because when you're reading and he starts talking about the king of the north, that's why you had the king of the north. See, the east and the west are out of the picture. King of the north now is that region that we're talking about. So we'll call it Syria for the most part because that's where it started. We'll call it Syria. Syria expanded. Then you have the king of the south, Ptolemy. The king of the south, that's Egypt. So what we're going to have now is the king of the north, Syria, the king of the south, Egypt, and you've got constant war between these two countries. Constant war between the king of the north and the king of the south. Remember, over a span of 375 years. So it keeps saying he, the king of the north, but but a lot of times that king has changed to a different king, but he's still the king of the north. Same is true in the south. That king has changed over time. All these prophecies, again, and this is the point I'm making, these prophecies were very, very accurate. So we go to verse number 5. It says, then the king of the south, his name was Ptolemy Soter. He grew strong along with Alexander's princes. It says his princes, but it's actually one of Alexander's princes. And that prince was Seleucus Nicator. Okay, so who will gain ascendancy over him. Now, Seleucus, Ptolemy Soter is the king of the south. Seleucus is the king of the north. So one of Alexander's princes became really strong, and he got stronger than the king of the south. That's what that verse is actually saying. He became stronger than the king of the south, and then he obtained dominion. And his dominion will be a great dominion indeed. When you go back, if you looked at secular history, you would see all of this pan out. Verse number 6. After some years, they, the king of the north, this is Syria, the king of the south, Egypt, will form an alliance. This is over time. And the daughter of the king of the south will come to the king of the north to carry out a peaceful arrangement. What's happening here? Well, Bernice is the daughter of Ptolemy Philadelphus. Now we've got new kings here in Egypt. His daughter, Bernice, was brought to Syria to marry the king of the north. And this king of the north is Antiochus the first. So they formed a marriage alliance. So they were trying to get peace or form peace through a marriage alliance, right? But now, Ptolemy Philadelphus, who was the king of Egypt, he already had a wife. The name of that wife was Laodice. And he, when he married Bernice, you know what he did? He took Laodice and threw her out the bed. She's no longer the queen, and brought in Bernice. You know, how would you like to be that queen? You probably wouldn't have minded being Bernice, but you wouldn't want to be Laodice. So she was kicked out. She was kicked out. She had two sons, by the way. She had two sons. And she was kicked out. So that's how they made peace. Right. So here's the thing. If we read the next part of that verse, look what it says. She will not, this is Bernice now, she will not retain her position of power, nor will he remain with his power, but she will be given up. That is, she was assassinated. Okay, over time she was assassinated. She will be given up along with those who brought her in. Those individuals, her attendants, were also assassinated. And the one who sired her as well. Now, that was her husband. That was the one we were just talking about, whom she married, Ptolemy Philadelphus. Antiochus of Syria. Antiochus of Syria. Him. She married him. Turns out that Bernice came along, not Bernice, but Laodice. She saw him because he, well, I'm kind of out of character. So let me go back. Here's what happened. Remember, Bernice married Antiochus. Antiochus kicked Laodice out of being queen. So we're at that particular point. Then what happened was Bernice's dad, who brought her up to marry this king, he died. And when he died and wasn't in power anymore, Antiochus kicked her out. That's what he did. He kicked her out. See? So then Laodice, and he brought Laodice back. So Laodice looked at him and she said, you know what? I don't trust this guy. So she assassinated him. She poisoned him. And then she took her son and put her son, his name was Seleucus Callinicus. She put her son in the place of her dead husband as being king. So now that's what you have there. You see, so that's why it says, if you paid attention to the passage, it says, she will not retain her position of power, nor will he remain in his power. And that's the reason why. And that's what this prophecy is saying. Remember, we're reading a prophecy, and this was several hundred years before, a couple of hundred years before this actually happened. She will be given up along with those who brought her in, and the one who sired her, again, that's the king again, as well as he who supported her in those times. See, now we go to verse number 7. But one of the descendants of her line will arise in his place, and he will come against their army and enter the fortress of the king of the north, and he will deal with them and display great strength. See, one of the descendants of her line, we're talking about Bernice, her brother became king in Egypt. His name was Ptolemy Euergetes. Ptolemy Euergetes. He becomes the king of Egypt. He grew strong. And then when he grew strong, he attacked and he plundered Syria. By plundering, if we go to verse number 8, we'll see what happens. Also, their gods and their metal images and their precious vessels of silver and gold he will take into captivity in Egypt. So he took all of their wealth and riches, and he, on his part, will refrain from attacking the king of the north for some years. So I think he thinks now, we plundered them, it's over, and everything is going to be okay. But then, and then in verse 9, it says, then the latter will enter the realm of the king of the south, but will return to his own land. So it seems like what's happened now is that the king of Syria was able to travel back and forth into Egypt with no problem at this point. So there was no war between the two, and it just kind of went like that for a while. But then in verse 10, his sons will mobilize and assemble a multitude of great forces, and one of them will keep on coming and overflow and pass through, that he may again wage war up to his very forces. So now you had two men, two sons. These were Laodicea sons, okay? The sons of the kings of Syria. That is Seleucus, Cyrenius, and Antiochus the Great. And what they did was they made a strong attack against Egypt. And notice it says one of them will keep on coming and overflow and pass through. The reason why it says just one of them, because at the time, Seleucus Cyrenius, I think that's his name, Seleucus Cyrenius, he was the king of Syria. He was actually the son of Callinicus. I said he was Laodicea's son, but he was Laodicea's grandson. And he was a king for a while, but he was kind of weak. He struggled to put together an army. So there were a couple of his generals that didn't like him, so they poisoned him. You're going to see there's a lot of poisoning in this story, a whole lot of poisoning. So they poisoned him. And when they poisoned him, then Antiochus the Great, who was the next individual, he